Are you into strange and spooky? Then you need to check out Shadow Market on June 27th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Manchester Event and Visitor Center in Manchester, Tennessee. It's just a short drive from Nashville. Shadow Market's a living tapestry of gothic goods, high fantasy, horror, dark art, oddities, and all things wonderfully weird. Pre-purchase tickets are just $11 or $15 at the door on the day of the event. You can purchase tickets and vendor booths now at shadowmarketus.com. Again, that's shadowmarketus.com. And be sure to follow Shadow Market on Facebook at facebook.com/shadowmarketus. Stay spooky. We'll see you at the Shadow Market. Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing is available. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I'm the American historian, Alan Searcy. Tonight's episode takes us far away from the human graveyards of the South and deep into the deserts of Arizona, where one of the most gruesome executions in American history unfolded before horrified witnesses in 1930. It's a story involving greed, murder, missing bodies, mysterious confessions, and an execution so violent that it changed Arizona's death penalty forever. By the time the sun rose over Florence Prison on February 21st, 1930, a woman named Eva Dugan would become the first woman ever executed by the state of Arizona. But that isn't what people remembered. Before the gallows, before the hood and the noose, before the blood pooling beneath the scaffold, there's a lonely ranch outside Tucson and an old man named Andrew Mathis who simply vanished. By the 1920s, Eva Dugan had already lived a hard and unpredictable life. Born in Missouri in the late 19th century, she grew up during the rough expansion of the American West. Mining towns, railroad camps, and isolated desert settlements shaped much of her adult life. She married young, had 5 children, and drifted through different states working as a cook, a housekeeper, and even a prostitute. Some people described her as intelligent and charming. Others described her as manipulative and dangerous. What nobody argued about was that Eva knew how to survive. She had spent years moving from place to place, adapting however she could, and by the time she reached Arizona, she had developed a reputation as a woman who lived outside society's expectations. And that reputation, it would later haunt her in court. Newspapers constantly emphasized her behavior. Reporters described her as smoking cigars, gambling, playing cards, and speaking bluntly. In the 1920s, that mattered a lot. Society expected women to behave quietly and modestly. Eva Dugan did not. Long before she was convicted of murder, newspapers were already portraying her as morally suspect simply because she refused to act the way people thought women should act back then. Eventually, Eva found work working near Tucson, working for Andrew J. Mathis. Mathis was an elderly rancher who lived alone on a remote property outside town. He was aging, isolated, and reportedly in pretty bad declining health. He needed help maintaining the house and the ranch, and Eva became his housekeeper. At first, nothing appeared unusual, but over time, neighbors began hearing arguments between the two. Some later claimed Mathis distrusted Eva and believed she was dishonest. Others say Eva complained that Mathis, he treated her bad. Hovering around the situation was another mysterious figure, a younger man known only as Jack. Nobody seemed to know much about Jack. Some said he was Eva's boyfriend. Others said he was simply a drifter who had fallen in with her. Witnesses later claimed he had spent time around the ranch during the period leading up to Mathis' disappearance. And then in January 1927, Matthew did that. He vanished without explanation. At first, people didn't immediately panic. Men disappeared all the time in the American West during that era. Some drifted into California, others hopped trains looking for work. But suspicions quickly began growing because Eva Dugan suddenly possessed Mathis's car. She had also begun selling his belongings. Furniture vanished from the ranch. Household items were sold off. And whenever people asked where Mathis had gone, Eva's stories, they changed. Sometimes she said he went to California. Other times she implied he had simply left unexpectedly. Authorities became suspicious almost immediately. When questioned by police, Eva denied any wrongdoing. She insisted Mathis had left voluntarily and claimed she had only taken possession of his belongings afterwards. But investigators noticed inconsistencies in her statements. Eventually, they arrested her for theft involving Mathis's car and property. At that point, however, they still had one major problem. They had no body. Without a corpse, proving murder was difficult. Everything changed when investigators discovered a shallow grave near the abandoned ranch house. Buried beneath the desert soil was a decomposed skeleton later identified as Andrew Mathis. Lime had been poured into the grave in an apparent attempt to accelerate decomposition and trying to destroy the evidence. Even so, investigators identified the remains through clothing fragments, personal belongings, and physical evidence recovered near the body. The discovery electrified Arizona newspapers. Suddenly, this was no longer a missing persons investigation. It was murder. Almost immediately, Eva Dugan became the focus of national attention. Newspapers portrayed her as a calculating killer who murdered an old man for his money. Headlines sensationalized every detail. Reporters described the lonely desert grave in graphic detail, and they painted Eva as a greedy drifter who preyed on vulnerable men. But beneath the sensational headlines, serious questions surrounded the case. The prosecution's evidence was largely circumstantial. No witnesses actually saw Andrew Mathis murdered. No one could place Eva at the scene during the killing itself. There was evidence she possessed Mathis's belongings and lied about his disappearance, but there was remarkably little direct evidence proving she committed the murder herself. And then there was Jack. The mysterious drifter remained a central part of this story. Several witnesses claimed Jack had accompanied Eva around the time Mathis vanished. Some described her as violent and unstable, yet somehow investigators never fully identified him or brought him into custody. The farther the trial progressed, the more Jack began feeling like a shadow drifting through the edges of the case. Still, prosecutors built a compelling narrative for the jury. According to the state, Eva Dugan and Jack murdered Andrew Mathis together for his property, for his automobile, and of course, his money. Prosecutors portrayed Eve as a manipulative and greedy woman who used charm and deception to lure vulnerable men into bad situations. The image resonated strongly with jurors and the public. And Eva's own courtroom behavior, it didn't help her very much. Reporters described her smoking, joking occasionally, and displaying little visible emotion during portions of the trial. To many observers, she simply looked guilty. In reality, people often misunderstood how defendants behave under immense stress. But in the 1920s, appearances mattered enormously, especially when you're on trial for murder. And Eva Dugan's reputation, it worked against her at every single stage. The jury convicted her of murder, and she was sentenced to death by hanging. With that verdict, Eva Dugan became the first woman condemned to execution by the state of Arizona. And once she entered prison, Eva transformed into a media obsession. Newspapers across America published stories about her daily life on death row. The public became fascinated by her apparent calmness, how cool she was. Guards described her as playing cards with other prisoners, smoking cigars, and she chatted casually with reporters who came to visit. One newspaper described her sitting calmly at a card table while journalists crowded around the women's death ward. Others reported that she cooked meals for herself and even comforted fellow inmates. At the same time, support for Eva began growing outside prison walls. Ministers, activists, and anti-death penalty advocates argued Arizona intended to execute a woman based almost entirely on circumstantial evidence. Even some people who believe Eva participated in the crime questioned whether the state had truly proven she deserved to be put to death. Then came one of the strangest twists in the entire case. A mysterious letter supposedly written by Jack surfaced. According to one newspaper, the letter claimed Jack, not Eva, had murdered Andrew Mathis. The writer allegedly described details of the killing and burial with unsettling accuracy. According to some accounts, Jack claimed Eva only helped cover up the crime because she was afraid of him. The confession reignited debate nationwide. Was the letter genuine? Had Arizona convicted the wrong person? Or was the confession an elaborate hoax designed to delay the execution? Authorities investigated, but never conclusively identified the writer. Without definitive proof, the courts refused to halt the execution. Governor John C. Phillips declined to intervene despite mounting pressure from activists and clergy. Eva Dugan was going to hang. And as the execution date approached, Florence Prison became crowded with reporters and officials preparing to witness the state's first execution of a woman. Executions during that era were treated almost like public spectacles for the press. Journalists received invitations. Witnesses gathered before dawn. Newspapers prepared front-page layouts in advance. Meanwhile, prison staff prepared the gallows. Behind the prison walls, rumor had already begun circulating that Eva Dugan intended to cheat the executioner entirely. It was believed that she was going to kill herself. Prison officials received information suggesting Eva, she was going to do something before she got to the scaffold. At first, guards dismissed the rumor as just prison gossip. Eva spent much of her time on death row projecting confidence and seemed to be in control of her emotions. She played cards with inmates, joked with guards, smoked cigars, and she even sold embroidered handkerchiefs to raise money for her own coffin. Newspapers nicknamed her Cheerful Eva because of how calm and oddly sociable she appeared while awaiting her execution. But prison officials became increasingly uneasy during the final 24 hours. Eva reportedly behaved differently as midnight approached. Authorities eventually decided to search her cell after hearing that she was going to do something before dawn. And what they discovered alarmed everyone. Hidden inside the cell was a bottle containing raw ammonia, which officials described as a deadly poison. Some accounts claim the bottle had been concealed under her mattress and hidden behind her belongings. Then guards searched Eva herself. During that search, the night before she was going to be hanged, they discovered 3 razor blades hidden inside the collar or folds of her dress. The discovery created immediate panic among the prison staff. Authorities believed Eva intended to use the ammonia and razors to commit suicide, hours before the execution. And that was going to deprive Arizona of their highly publicized hanging. Warden Lauren Wright reportedly ordered the increased surveillance immediately after the items were confiscated, and Eva was transferred under tighter guard to the condemned cell area so she could be watched continuously throughout the night. Despite the discovery, Eva quickly returned to the strange calmness that had fascinated reporters throughout her confinement there in the jail. Witnesses described her spending the remainder of her evening playing with her friends and fellow inmates while guards maintained constant watch outside her cell. At one point, she requested orangeade for everyone at the card table and jokingly called out to a guard, "Please bring on the orangeade. I want it now. Tomorrow will be too late." And later that night, she cooked herself a final meal on a small prison stove, reportedly preparing oyster stew while reporters waited outside the prison walls for dawn to arrive. And beyond the prison walls, Arizona prepared for history. And beneath the surface, disaster was waiting. Hanging required precise calculations. Executioners had to determine the prisoner's weight, the rope length, and the drop distance carefully. Too little force resulted in slow strangulation. Too much force, it could sever the head entirely. Prison officials badly miscalculated Eva Dugan's execution. In the early morning darkness of February 21st, 1930, guards escorted Eva toward the scaffold inside Arizona State Prison at Florence. Witnesses later described her as remarkably calm. She wore a black dress and showed little panic. Some observers noted only a slight tremble in her voice. She climbed the gallows steps one by one steadily. and the hood was placed over her neck. The noose, it was tightened. At 5:01, the trapdoor opened beneath her feet. But what happened next horrified everyone who was present. Instead of breaking her neck cleanly, the force of the drop decapitated her instantly. As her body plunged to the scaffold, her head was ripped inside the hood. Witnesses froze in shock. Some screamed. Others just turned away in horror. Blood poured beneath the gallows while Eva's headless body dangled below the platform. The execution chamber descended into chaos. Reports described guards as being visibly shaken, and some witnesses reportedly became physically ill. Newspapers across the country exploded with sensational, amazing headlines describing the gruesome spectacle. And one article described how Eva's body dropped below the scaffold while her severed head remained trapped in the hood above. And as you would expect, the public reaction was enormous. Anti-death penalty advocates seized upon the execution, calling it barbaric and inhumane. Arizona officials faced national embarrassment. The execution became one of the most infamous botched hangings in American history and played a major role in Arizona eventually abandoning hanging altogether in favor of the gas chamber. But the story wasn't over. Decades later, another shocking discovery opened questions surrounding the Mathis murder. In 1977, construction workers near the old ranch reportedly uncovered human remains believed to belong to the mysterious Jack. And if true, the discovery changed the entire case dramatically. Suddenly, it appeared possible that Jack himself had been murdered long ago. Theories exploded. Some believed Eva and Jack killed Mathis together before eventually turning on each other. Others argued Jack murdered Mathis and later disappeared permanently. And some insisted Arizona may have executed Eva Dugan without ever fully understanding the truth. No final answers ever came. They never will. Today, Eva Dugan remains one of the most controversial figures in Arizona history. To some, she was a manipulative killer who got exactly what she deserved. To others, she represents the danger of sensational trials built more on public outrage than hard evidence. But regardless of guilt or innocence, her death became unforgettable. Nearly a century later, people still remember the horrifying moment as Arizona's first executed woman stepped through the gallows trapdoor and lost her head before horrified witnesses. And naturally, there are some ghost stories that followed. Visitors to the old Arizona State Prison, they reported strange occurrences near the execution area. Some claim they hear footsteps echoing through the corridors at night. Others describe shadowy figures moving near the old gallows site. A few insist they've heard a woman crying softly in the darkness. And whether those stories are supernatural or simply the lingering weight of history, it's impossible to say. But places touched by violent death often seem to absorb tragedy in their walls. And few deaths in American history were more violent or more horrifying than Eva Dugan's. So don't forget, my new book is dropped, Pistols at Red River. It's available now. You can grab a copy over at Amazon. It's the Andrew Jackson Doolin story. And coming up this weekend, I'll be at Spawn Scarefest, June 5th to the 7th, Friday through Sunday. I'll be signing books in the Southern Ghost Stories booth. Come and find me. Say hello. If you want to stay for the weekend, you can watch Jaws late, I think it's Friday night, in a swimming pool with a big screen. I'm not sure if I can watch Jaws in the pool at night, but hey, more power to you if you can. Also, one more thing. Have you guys been to MonsterCityMadhouse.com yet? Monster City Madhouse. Their new creature from the Black Lagoon shirt, man, it's a lot of fun. Who says monsters can't have a work-life balance? The unisex Lagoon Life shirt celebrates everyone's favorite gill man, living his best swamp life with his family. Whether he's teaching the kids to do the backstroke or just vibing by the lagoon, this vintage cotton polyester blend tee proves that even creatures from the deep deserve a tropical vacation, as do we all. It's perfect for horror fans who appreciate a little domestic bliss, monster style. And don't forget to use promo code SAVE10 to get 10% off your order. That's right, SAVE10 to get 10% off your order. And that code works for any shirt on the site. It's not just for the new Lagoon Life. He has the new Gravestone shirt, which has like the old Tombstone, the Wyatt Earp. It's monsters. It's really cool. So if you haven't already, make sure you're following or subscribe wherever you listen. Leave a rating if you can, and share the show with somebody who's into true crime, ghost stories, or just weird, wild history. That stuff matters more than people think. And to those who've done the reviews here lately, I really appreciate you. Be sure to follow Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook and Instagram. You can send me comments and questions if you want to hear them answered on a future Q&A show. Just go to Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook and drop me a line. All right, so guys, thank you for listening to Southern Ghost Stories. I'm Alan Searcy, the American Haunt Historian, and until next time. Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts, with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing is available.